Here is the thing. Birds are real, and it's mean to say that they're not.
That is the thing. Wow. No contractions today.
Felt a little more formal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Felt like just being a little more formal today.
Makes sense. Because we have all these new listeners today.
Because we have all these new listeners today. We just wanted to be on our best behavior.
Yes, absolutely.
Why do we have new listeners?
We don't, actually. Our last episode is flopping hard.
Usually we have a pretty good listener base. I feel like last episode, maybe the algorithm just did us a little bit dirty this time around.
Yeah, hard to not take it personally, but what are you going to do?
But if you're listening to this episode and somehow missed last episode, maybe it just didn't pop up in your Spotify, maybe you didn't see our Instagram post for some reason, hit up that one. It was a good one.
About parrots.
About pirates and parrots.
Parrots and pirates. They sound very similar.
They do sound very similar. And I feel like that's a fan favorite topic.
I know.
Everyone
think so.
Everyone loves talking about parrots and pirates.
Yeah, so give it another listen if you haven't yet. But I will say this to everyone listening. I feel like maybe we complain a little bit about our lack of growth. But I don't know. It's really cool that you listen to this podcast. We really appreciate you listening. So thank you. This is, I wouldn't say it's a dream come true. I don't think it's a dream I ever had, but it's fun. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. Jokes aside, definitely not taking it for granted every single person that listens to this, because, I don't know, I feel like it's kind of cool that you're just listening to us talk about birds. So.
I know. How cool. And I feel like a lot of people in my life have now started telling me about bird things, and maybe they weren't interested in birds before, and that just kind of makes me feel like God, so...
Yeah, so let's just get into our field notes. We had a pretty busy week this week, I would say.
It was looking like it wouldn't be busy for a little bit there, but it ended up being pretty busy.
So we went birding on Wednesday, a work day, school night.
A school night.
Because the rest of the entire week, it was rainy and cold and cloudy. Yeah. I think we were probably mentioning it last episode too, which is a week ago, and it was still the case. Yeah, the weather's just been terrible.
We had one nice day, and we took advantage of it.
Yeah, Wednesday was nice, so I texted Sam. I was like, we got to get out there. And we saw 3 lifers, I think.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
It was very cool.
We saw a Sora, which is a type of rail. Yeah,
kind of similar to a coot, but a little more landy.
Yeah, it's a little more... by the shore still, semi-aquatic, but definitely more on land.
Bright yellow bill.
Really cool bright yellow bill, yeah. Guys are smaller than I would have thought, like just looking at a photo. Yeah. But they're really small.
Proportion-wise, you'd think it was a little bigger. You'd think it was kind of like, I don't know, it feels like it has the proportions of like a chicken or like a pheasant or something, right?
Exactly.
It's pretty tiny.
Yeah, but it's about like half the size of that.
Yeah.
But that was really cool. We wouldn't have even known it was there. Some birders told us, they're like, hey, did you guys see the Sora yet? I was like, oh no, where is it? And they just pointed it out. Exactly. It was like by the fishing pier, but instead of looking onto the water, you have to look
like directly below,
kind of like directly below the pier, which is not something you would have like.
It was difficult to see. Like there were a group of probably 5 or 6 of us at the most on this little pier looking for the Sora, and we all knew it was right there. We could kind of hear it moving around, but hard to see because it's tiny and it was just in the reeds, kind of hiding from everyone. So it was pretty interesting, I feel like.
Yeah, and the thing we were looking for was that bright yellow bill, which helped us find it when we could. Next thing we saw was a Wilson snipe.
Yeah, which is very, very close to the fabled American woodcock, but slightly different.
Yeah, looks-wise, very, very similar. And from these birders, I also knew there was Wilson snipes around. They told me around the bend near the impoundment where the Wilson snipes were supposed to be. And I scanned the area. I was like, there's no Wilson snipes here.
There's nothing here.
And then Sam and I met up, and we ran into the people again. And they're like, oh, you see these Wilson snipes out here? I was like, no, I scanned, and I did not see any. But they camouflaged really, really well.
So well, yeah. It was really interesting. We kind of had a longer conversation with some of the birders there about, like, well, wow, it's really hard to describe where a bird is. Mm-hmm. Like, if you're looking for a bird and someone's trying to describe it to you, it's really difficult. Because think about if you're just looking at a tree. Well, how can you describe where something is on a tree? You say, oh, you see that branch? It's like, yeah, I see 40 of them. Like, which one are you talking about?
Yeah, it's like, oh, hey, you see that branch? Go a little bit below it, but also like a little bit behind it. Like, you sound like an idiot trying to explain it, but there's a skill to it.
There's a skill to it.
And these birders were pretty good. They were directing us by like where the sunlight was hitting, where the land was meeting the water, because there was like a bunch of puddles around.
Yeah, this was kind of in a marshy area, so not like trees around, but some like a couple of big shadows that we could use as reference points. And these people were really impressive because they were just looking with their bare eyes and just be like, oh yeah, there's 3 more over there, there's a couple there, and we have these 600 millimeter magnification zoom lenses. We're looking, we're like, I can't see a single thing, but eventually we found them.
Yeah, these birders are very impressive, which kind of leads into our main topic today. So we'll leave a little bit of suspense there.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah, you'll find out soon.
Nice.
And what was the last lifer we saw?
Last one we saw was the blue-gray gnatcatcher, which a very different kind of, like the Wilson snipe, the Sora, kind of in the same like vibe of bird.
Kind of like a shorebird.
Yeah. But blue-gray gnatcatcher is kind of the other thing we're excited to see coming up. It's not a warbler, but it's reminiscent of warblers. It's a small little songbird.
It's a songbird, yeah. Little guys, they have a pretty nice, I mean, it's in the name blue-gray.
It is a very
pretty,
nice blue-gray.
Cool color that you don't see on a lot of other birds.
Yeah. It's kind of similar to a tufted titmouse in a way.
Kind of, yeah, for sure. It's got that pretty distinct white eye ring, which is really cool.
No tuft.
No tuft.
But that was a really nice one to see. There were a couple of them flittering around in the trees. And that was something we got so used to going to John Hines and really scanning like the water and the shore during these last few months because it was mostly ducks and the occasional shorebird, but mostly ducks we were looking at, some gulls. And then the trees were so bare, if there was a little guy flittering around, it was pretty easy to find.
Right. But now as the trees start to get their leaves back, start to become a little denser depending on the type of the tree, we're going to have to pay a little more attention.
This was good practice.
This was good
blue-gray
practice.
Gnatcatcher. We did luck out a little bit because there was another birder there who was very intently locked in on this blue-gray gnatcatcher. So we just kind of like walked up behind him. We were like trying to see the direction his camera was angled, and then we're like, oh look, there's a
You're like, hey,
bird.
what's this guy looking at? But yeah, that was a cool bird.
So that was cool. It was kind of a spur of the moment trip going there. We didn't plan it, but Wednesday afternoon we were like, it's so nice today, and it's not going to be nice any other day. We have to go.
Yeah, and hey, not bad for a Wednesday evening. 3 lifers, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully many more coming up this spring migration.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm on a mission this year. I don't know if I've mentioned this on the podcast. I might have, but I'm on a mission to hit 200 lifers. That's my New Year's resolution. I think I'm at 144. Technically 143 because the cackling goose doesn't count, but I don't know how to get rid of it. So that's my goal. Seeing 3 really helped out there, and I'm really hopeful that the combination of shorebirds and warblers that we're about to see coming up will get me really close, but that's still a long ways to go.
Yeah, 60 lifers in a year, I feel like is a tall task. I think you're up to it. Like you said, spring migration, summertime is probably where you're going to get the most of them. Maybe if you could do a little trip somewhere, you can get a whole new slew of lifers.
Yeah, well, Rochelle and I are planning on going to Maine on our honeymoon because we're getting married. Those of you who are new listeners maybe don't know us. I am getting married to our producer, Rochelle. So as a nice wedding gift, why don't you tell 8 people you know to listen to this podcast?
Yeah, see, this is why all my ideas get shot down. They outnumber me on this podcast.
Exactly,
so.
Yeah.
I have so many good ideas, but Sam and Rochelle, they just knock them down. So
I know.
What can you do?
I know. Well, I have to have complete creative control, and that's why the podcast is dying. But what are you going to do? But we're going to Maine.
Maybe you'll see some puffins. Or have you already seen puffins?
I've seen a puffin before.
Okay.
We went to Maine a couple of years ago, and we just hit the tail end of like when puffins are there. We went on a boat tour, saw a whale, which was cool, and then also like a single puffin.
This guy's got a puffin shirt on right now.
I do have a puffin shirt. I got it in Maine. We're going a little earlier in the year this time when the puffins are more abundant. And in addition to the puffins, we might see some other, not quite shorebirds, but ocean birds. So
like your petrels,
like
and stuff
petrels,
like that.
terns, and if we're lucky, we might see some guillemots. Have you heard of a guillemot?
Never heard of that in my life.
Or an auklet.
You're making stuff up right now.
Okay, well, I have to look more into this, but these are birds that look very similar to penguins,
Oh,
and
interesting.
puffins. So puffins kind of fit into this category because they do fly, these birds, but they also swim quite a bit. And they have really weird, really distinctive faces. And they're found just like up north in the water. So off the coast of like Alaska, there's a whole bunch of them. Off the coast of Washington, there's a lot in like the Pacific, right? But there are still some in the Atlantic, including the puffin, and hopefully some more. I'm going to have to look more into what I might possibly see. But
Cool. Yeah. And again, that also leads into our main topic, which I'm still not going to tell you.
Excellent.
Because we have one more thing to talk about in our field notes, which is the Darby Creek cleanup.
Yeah, we said we were going to do it. It was touch and go there for a bit, but we did end up doing it, which was great.
Yeah, it was a great time. John Hines has given so much to us in terms of our birding, so you got to give.
You got to give.
You got to give back. It was a rainy 30-degree morning.
Yep.
But we got in the waders and we cleaned up a lot of trash.
So much trash. Yeah. So like we got there, there were a lot of people there. There might have been 100 people there. I don't know. At least 70.
I like 50 plus for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Which was really cool to see because normally they plan this. If you weren't listening to last episode, just for some context, the place we go birding, John Hines National Wildlife Refuge, I think it's once a year. It's at least once a season, like once in the spring. They host this cleanup day where there's a creek running through the refuge called Darby Creek, and it's kind of at the bottom of
the watershed.
So like the Delaware River feeds into it. So all of the trash that kind of gets swept up in the Delaware River basically makes its way to John Hines and kind of settles on the shores there.
Yeah, John Hines is kind of downstream, like the final ending point or close to it, and all the stuff that accumulates from upstream, from the cities, from the towns, like it all kind of accumulates, at the end of the watershed. So yeah, we were out there in the mud flats in our waders. Sam almost got stuck for a bit there because he went pretty deep.
I did go pretty deep. The thing about when you get stuck in the mud is your foot goes in and then it just kind of sinks down, and then the mud comes in around it. So it's really hard to get your foot out, right?
Kind of like quicksand.
But once you get that one foot out, you've been stepping so hard with your other foot, the other one sinks in. And then I got stuck in 20 minutes of just every step I took, I got stuck and had to wiggle my way out. Eventually, I overheard someone say, "No one helped me, by the way."
Yeah.
No one said a word. I fell over, and no one even was like, "Hey, are you okay?" They just kept picking up their trash. They were locked in. To their credit, they're locked in. But I overheard someone telling another person who was stuck that what you want to do is point your foot, so point your toe down, and then lift up, and that works because then there's not mud on top of your foot holding it down. There's just kind of a tube that you can pull your foot right out. So it got easier after that.
Yeah, so while Sam was playing in the mud or whatever, I was actually cleaning up the trash. We each got I feel like if we account 1.5 to 2 bags of trash per person, it's 100 bags of trash that we all cleaned up.
I got 3 bags.
Well, I got 1 small bag and 1 really big bag. So,
yeah,
I mean, whatever.
We got about the same, I think.
Yeah.
One fun thing they did during this was they kind of had a competition, which was the weirdest trash competition. So if you found something especially strange, most of what we were seeing was just plastic bottles, plastic cups, styrofoam straws.
Got a bunch of lighters.
Yeah, exactly.
Stuff like that.
But if you found something really interesting, you could keep it out of the trash bag and put it in a little pile, and then you would vote on it at the end, and whoever had the weirdest trash won. So some of the weird things that I considered putting in there, I did find a retainer, which I thought was pretty interesting, but
pretty interesting.
Still it's not the most unexpected thing, so I did not submit that. We each found a basketball. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We just threw those away. Not super interesting either.
Because there were a lot of basketballs. Someone did submit a basketball to the weirdest trash competition. It did not win.
Yep.
I found a tiny croc, like a shoe, like a toy croc.
Yeah.
I heard later that it's apparently something they're giving away in McDonald's Happy Meals. Mm. But I found a little toy croc. I thought that was pretty interesting. And then I did find something that I submitted to the contest, which was a shoe. And the shoe, I picked it up and I was like, oh, this is interesting, a shoe. That was the first shoe I had seen. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, oh, this stick is impaled through it. I got to get the stick out. So I tried pulling the stick out, and I realized the stick was actually part of a plant that had roots that were growing out of the shoe. And the shoe also had a bunch of little buds. It had like a whole ecosystem growing on it. So I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. I like this shoe.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool as well.
So I went up to the pile. I put my thing down. One of the workers was like, oh, what do you got there? And I was like, oh, a shoe. It's got like these plants growing off of it. And the worker was like, okay, cool shoe. And I was like, oh man, was this not interesting enough?
I told Sam to submit it though. I thought it was pretty interesting.
I thought so too.
It just, the only people that voted for it were me and Sam.
Yeah,
but
it got 2 votes.
I didn't submit anything. I did, because I didn't find any like cool trash per se. I did find the skull of a mammal of some sort. We thought it was either going to be like a muskrat or a beaver or something. So I thought that was kind of cool. Someone else found a duck skull.
So it was like a fully preserved, basically, duck skull.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are things that are like natural and kind of supposed to be there, so we left them there. But yeah, the thing that won was just like a big block of styrofoam that also, similar to Sam's shoe, had like an ecosystem growing on it, like a bunch of different plants, a bunch of different like moss or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So that thing won.
It kind of cleaned up. It got a lot of votes. And it was bigger, it was flashier. But we saw so much styrofoam that day. Yeah. That was the only shoe I saw all day. And it had plants growing out of it. So, I don't know.
Yeah, the main trash that we did see was a lot of, like, single-use plastic. Like, a bunch of different... Like, a lot of water bottles, Gatorade bottles. I don't know, like, Capri Sun pouches.
Yeah, Kool-Aid jammer.
Yeah, so if you can avoid using some single-use plastic, go for it. Because it'll end up at John Hines Wildlife Refuge. We'll clean it up, though.
Yeah, we'll pick it up next year.
But yeah, that was a really fun experience, and it just felt really good to give back to a place that has given us so much in terms of birding and just being out in nature.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty incredible to have a wildlife refuge like this in a city, which I think is pretty special. So yeah, anything we can do to keep it clean, might as well.
Yeah, 100%.
And even though it was rainy and cold, while we were there we actually did have a couple of bird encounters, which was pretty cool.
Oh yeah, it was dope. We were down in the mud, and greater yellowlegs, I think it was, kind of came down and was like eye level with us. We were both thinking like, oh, if we had our cameras, that would have been really cool right now. The cameras would have got very muddy and messed up.
Yeah.
But, yeah,
it was really cool being that close to one of these guys that normally doesn't let you get very close, but it kind of wanted to come see what we were doing. And no one there was moving very fast because, we were trudging through the mud, so I think it probably felt a little more safe because we were all going real slow.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot more mobile than we were in that moment.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. We saw a couple of yellow legs throughout that process. And then as we were leaving, very confusing. We were told that we were supposed to leave our shoes at the beginning and like just bring our waders out there. There's a little like bus that took us out to zone 4. It ended up in zone 4, which was the coolest zone.
The best zone.
Yeah. But then when we were coming back, we were told, oh, you have to put your shoes on before you get back on the bus. And we thought, oh, well, our shoes are back at the start.
Yeah, you have to like take off your waders and then put your shoes back on because you're not wearing your shoes in your waders.
Yeah.
So they told us to take our waders off to get back onto the shuttle. And we're like, we don't have shoes.
Yeah. So we walked back.
Yeah.
And on our way back, we saw on a branch a bird that, like, it looked about the size of the birds we're normally seeing, maybe like a mourning dove size, maybe a little bit bigger.
Pretty small.
But pretty small overall. But we looked a little closer. We didn't have our cameras or binoculars or anything, but we're like 95% sure that was an American kestrel.
Yeah, the Android zoom came into handy. Yeah. Don't knock the Android zoom.
Don't sleep on the Android zoom.
Definitely was an American kestrel. Always seem smaller than you think they are because they're a raptor, but they're so small.
Yeah, they're a type of falcon, but they're really tiny.
And then the bus finally came through and like saw us walking. We only had probably like half a mile to go. Maybe. And they're like, okay, we'll just pick you up.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay.
Okay, cool.
Sounds good.
We did that. And then we got back. They had some like pizza, pretzels for us, which was really nice.
Yeah.
But then we saw on the Discord that they were seeing a yellow-throated warbler, which there's a lot of warblers that have the word yellow in their name, so it's kind of hard to keep track of. Yellow rumped warbler was one we saw a lot last year.
There's
yellow warbler.
Just a yellow warbler, yeah.
So like people were saying yellow-throated warbler, and in my mind that was like, oh, something we saw last year. But then like I looked it up, and that was a new one. That's not one that's normally very common around here.
Yeah, it's considered rare for the area, and yeah, one we neither of us had on our life lists.
Mm-hmm. So we went out to try and find it. There was another guy out there also trying to find it, and did not see it. We think maybe we heard it. It was hard to say. It was pretty faint. We definitely heard a warbler at least. But we did see some warblers, just not the yellow-throated. But we saw some yellow-rumped and some palm warblers, which I looked at my life list, and I have either never seen a palm warbler or I just haven't put it in the list. So that I got to add that as a lifer.
Yeah, I think you just probably forgot to add it to the list.
I think so.
Again, so many connections to the main topic today.
Wow, that's great. It's like we've already talked about it.
It's like we were like, do we even need to talk about it? You've already heard the main topic. No.
So yeah, overall kind of a weird birding week, but a great one.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to the hoot topics.
Yeah, hoot topics. We are running quite low. We're actually going back to the well, an email we've used before, but not a question we've used before.
Yeah, it's kind of a hoot topic recession, if you will. We're only doing one hoot topic today, as opposed to our usual two, because we are running a bit low. So
yeah. Please do send them in. We'll put out a poll on Instagram. If you don't want to send an email, you prefer to just type a question out on Instagram.
Yeah, that works too.
But anything would be really helpful to keep the content machine rolling. But we want to thank once again Randy Spaghetti, who was disappointed that we didn't say what an amazing email he sent. It was an amazing email. I laughed, I cried, I printed it out, I keep it under my pillow when I sleep at night. Thank you, Randy Spaghetti. What an email. What a question. Here's the question. What is your favorite or least favorite country and national bird pairing? I'd like to be clear, I'm not saying my favorite or least favorite country. I'm specifically saying my favorite or least favorite pairing.
Of national bird and the country.
Yes.
I was looking through the list on Wikipedia, and two stood out to me. Honorable mention, I will go with the country of Guyana and the Hoatzin.
Yeah.
We've talked about the Hoatzin previously on the avian digestive system episode, and the Hoatzin's got a unique usage of its crop, which if you want to learn about that, check out that episode.
Yeah.
But I thought that was cool, just honorable mention there. And then my pick for my favorite would be Jamaica and the doctor bird.
The doctor bird. I need to look at this doctor bird.
Doctor bird, also known as the red-billed streamer tail. It's a species of hummingbird, but I kind of just like the name doctor bird.
Wow. Yeah, Dr. Bird. Hello, Dr. Bird.
They're endemic to Jamaica, meaning they're only found in Jamaica. And they have this really cool like scissor tail, like two very prominent fork, or two very prominent protrusions for its tail. And I think it's just cool that it's like only found on the island of Jamaica.
Yeah, that is very cool. I think it's great when a country leans into like a bird that is unique, if not unique, at least like somewhat specific to them.
I agree, because like looking at this list, there's so many for like golden eagle or this this falcon.
So many eagles. The amount of golden eagles. I mean, here's the thing. Ben Franklin, when the United States was being colonized, he was like, the wild turkey should be the national bird of America because it represents so many things that America represented to him. I can't remember what that was. But he made a very compelling argument from the thing that I read. And we ended up using the bald eagle. And I mean, the bald eagle is a very striking bird. It's very cool. But so many countries use the eagle. If not the bald eagle, the golden eagle or another eagle. And I think having the wild turkey would be very cool. Because I think turkeys might be unique to, if not the United States, North America at least.
Yeah, but would a wild turkey scream freedom? Would a wild turkey scream, we're going to conquer you?
Well, but the bald eagle doesn't even scream that. It's the red-tailed hawk.
That's true. A little known fact. We've never said that on the pod before.
We've never talked about that before. So, yeah, the eagles, like, they're cool. I'm a little disappointed in the countries that chose that. Mm-hmm. Some that kind of stuck out to me as pretty cool. Czech Republic using the common kingfisher. I thought that was a pretty cool choice.
Okay,
That's not
cool.
like something I would associate with the Czech Republic. That's a bird I normally associate with Japan, I think, when I think of the common kingfisher.
Japan. I think UK has quite a few. One of our listeners, Scotty, shout out Scotty, he sent us a message on Instagram that he saw some common kingfishers.
Yeah, which are very cool. Not like the name suggests that they're very common. They're not. They're really like striking, I think.
Kind of like the common loon. Like in my field guide, my Sibley field guide, when you turn to the common loon page, the first words says generally uncommon.
Yeah.
For the common loon. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. Malaysia, they're doing it completely right with the rhinoceros hornbill. If you have something called a rhinoceros hornbill, and if you look up a picture, like, you know this bird, you have to make it your national bird. That's so sick. And I do think there was one more I wanted to shout out. Northern Ireland with the Eurasian oyster catcher. Ooh. I feel like that's just not like the type of bird you would think initially to make a national bird. But
I respect it.
I really like it. It's just a kind of a goofy looking guy. Shout out Northern Ireland. I know you're kind of doing your thing. Keep doing your thing.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Thanks, Randy, for coming in clutch with some hoot topics.
Yeah.
Always very appreciated. Let's just get into the main topic. What do you say?
I'm excited. Let's get into it.
We're talking about identifying some birds.
Yes, we are.
We kind of allude to it all the time, but I really want to break it down.
Cool. This is good.
I feel like we do a lot of assumed things in our mind when we're IDing birds, and I really just want to get to the nitty-gritty with it, just so we can lay it out and like actually talk about our thought processes.
This is great because I feel like I have become reliant on Merlin to identify birds, whether it's through the step-by-step or taking a picture and identifying it. And I do really want to improve my reasoning or my identification just through myself or using the resources I have, like a field guide.
Yeah, I feel that. So let's get into it. So I want to talk about what goes into a bird ID, and there's different levels to the game of bird identification. In many ways, we're still beginners, and we will always be beginners in some way because there's 11,000 species of bird out there.
Yep.
And we will never be, I was going to say fluent in all of them, we will never be familiar with like all of them.
Yeah, I'm hoping for 200 this year. So
nice.
At that rate, I'll be, 600 by the time I hit 11,000?
But yeah, in some ways, we're very familiar with at least our local species, and can identify them pretty accurately and through a lot of different ways.
Yeah. I think like people can do that too, right? You look outside, you see a bird with a bright red chest, you think, oh, that's a robin.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And I think sometimes I just think about bird ID and, my thought process in that. It's kind of like a second nature kind of thing, but I'm not really like going through the steps
right
as I should each time.
Yeah, it's more so like either I know what this bird is or I don't know what this bird is.
Exactly, yeah. So I wanted to go through the different components of a bird ID and see maybe if I can get myself to think outside the box a little bit and not, get pigeonholed, bird pun, into the same way that I think about bird ID all the time. So yeah, I just want to reiterate that bird identification is kind of a lifelong skill that can take forever to master. And even when you've quote unquote mastered it, there's always like more you can learn. And I say this to remind myself a little bit that like when I don't get a bird ID right, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's all a learning process. And even when talking to more experienced birders, like we mentioned during our field notes section, it can seem like they just like know everything like innately, almost. They're very confident and they're right most of the time.
Yep.
But everyone started at the same place.
Yeah.
We maybe knew a couple of birds growing up, but we never really intently, like no one grows up being a birder like right away, right?
Yeah. You always have to have a first time identifying any given bird.
Exactly. And these experienced birders can make it seem really easy, but I think birders of all levels, we can recognize that you kind of got to build it up and do the work, and that takes some time.
Yeah.
And going off of that, I think once you do realize that, you can even come to respect the people that like know a lot even more, because they've gone through the motions of starting as beginners and becoming like the encyclopedias of knowledge that they now are.
Yeah, we had kind of an interesting experience trying to identify a bird while we were at the Darby Creek cleanup.
Oh, yes.
Towards the end, we were waiting for the shuttle to come before we knew we couldn't ride on the shuttle. And we were looking around and we saw these birds and we're like, wow, what are these things? They're really like, we've never seen this before. They're kind of robin-sized or even bigger, but they're brown in a way that a robin's dark brown, but this was like a nice bright buff, like reddish brown almost. And they had this really bright white spot at the base of their tail. And so we're like, wow, what is this? I've never seen this before. We tried putting into Merlin. We couldn't come up with the answer. We asked some birders around us. They're like, I don't know, is it like a mockingbird? We're like, no, we're not describing this right. We've discovered a new species, I think, right? And then it turned out that they were northern flickers.
Yeah, I think we decided on northern flicker.
Which is a bird that we've seen a million times at John Hines a million times.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that. That kind of like was the catalyst for me thinking about this episode, because we should, like, I don't know, I feel like we kind of got stuck in a certain way of thinking, like, oh, hey, we know that the northern harrier has like a white patch at the base, or like a white part at the base of its tail, but we know that's not a northern harrier, so like what could it be?
Right.
So I just wanted to take a bit more of like a step back, if you will, and let's get into it. So Sam, let's pretend you saw a bird.
Great.
What is your thought process? What are the inner machinations of your mind telling you when you're trying to ID a bird?
Right. I mean, the first thing I think of is, have I seen this bird before? Right. Is this something familiar to me? In a lot of cases, it is, because I go to the same place all the time. There's going to be a lot of the same birds that I normally see. So if it's something like a robin, like a flicker now, I'll look for things like size, relative size. If it's a bird I'm really familiar with, that sometimes just kind of gives it away right from there. Robin is a bird that will fool us sometimes because it's bigger than you might expect it to be, but at this point I expect the size. So size and color are probably the first things I look at.
Cool. So first and foremost, I think is to just observe and study the bird when it's right in front of you. Like, don't pull out your field guide, don't pull out Merlin. Like, while the bird's in front of you, glean as much information as you can. Learn as much about the bird as you can, like, while it's there. Because as we know, moments with birds are fleeting. They could be with you 1 second and gone the next, right?
Yep.
And then after that, then you can go into your field guide. Then you can go into your identification, right? Also, just watching birds do their thing is kind of the best part about birding. Yeah. So while you can, enjoy the bird, see what it's doing, and then figure out the ID later.
Yeah, I really enjoy, we've been honing in on bird behaviors recently. And it is kind of fun. You can tell a bird by its personality. Like, we saw more ruby-crowned kinglets the other day. And even without seeing the ruby-crowned, you could tell it was them because they got, like, close to us and they were kind of jumping around and didn't care that we got close. And we've come to know that that's sort of a ruby-crowned thing. Yeah.
It's funny because, like, maybe last season or, like, X amount of weeks ago, it was a lifer for us, and now we're seeing it so often, and we're getting really familiar with it. We know what it likes to do. I don't know. I just think that's kind of cool. We're like getting to know it.
I agree.
So yeah, firstly, I think the most obvious and intuitive way we aim to identify birds is by the way they look, which you kind of just mentioned. It may seem a bit silly or simplistic, but I think there is some utility in pointing out, like, very obviously, like the steps of the identification. Like you mentioned, size, shape, color. I might add, like, distinct markings, like we mentioned the blue-gray gnatcatcher earlier. They have this very distinct white eye ring.
Right.
Like the killdeer has, like, two bands around its neck. Something very obvious that other birds may not have.
Like, you think of, like, a blue jay, for example. It's got the crest, but then also the very specific pattern.
Yes, for sure. And no other bird has that. So, distinct markings, beak shape even. But, just by looking at the bird, it's not as easy as it sounds, because we know the way that birds look change with age, sex, time of year, and let's just go through some examples of that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the trickiest sets of birds to identify are the hawks, because throughout the year, a Cooper's hawk, a sharp-shinned hawk, and a red-shouldered hawk will all look like each other at, like, various points in the year, various stages in their lives. Sometimes they'll all kind of have just a solitary, like, brown and then white with some speckles on it on their belly. But then sometimes the belly is red, but then sometimes it's red on all three of those things. And it's really hard to tell the difference. Yeah,
I'm glad you mentioned the sharp-shinned hawk versus the Cooper's hawk thing. That is, like, a pretty like, famous identification to get mixed up. The thing I went back to was, episode 1 of this podcast. I've probably listened to that more times than I'd like to admit. But I mentioned the red-winged blackbird, very common bird that we're both very familiar with. The male is, looks very distinct, has a very distinct call. But at the time, the female, I thought it was maybe like a thrush or something a little different.
Yeah.
Now we obviously know, like, I can look at a female red-winged blackbird and know it's a female red-winged blackbird. For me, primarily because of the beak shape.
Right.
The blackbirds have very specific beak shapes. But I don't know, it's kind of endearing to look back and, to see that I was confused about a female red-winged blackbird. But I was, and, I was a beginner birder back then. I still am in many aspects. But yeah, no, it's just cool to see how, how far we've come, kind of. It feels weird to say. I've been birding less than a year. But yeah, that's just another example of birds that look quite different based on, the male versus the female. I think another pretty obvious example is the bald eagles, the juvenile bald eagles. Mm-hmm. To the untrained eye, it could present as a totally different bird. Yeah. But we know that the juvenile bald eagles don't have that like white head and a uniform brown feathering. Yeah. They are kind of speckled.
Right. And so once people get more into it, I'm not there yet. I don't think you're there either, but maybe you are. I don't know. But I think we're not there yet. Some people can look at a juvenile bald eagle and tell if it's like a first-year juvenile or if it's like a second year, or they can differentiate that much based on just the changes in like coloration and marking.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I don't think we're there yet, but I think getting there just means giving it a little more attention. Mm-hmm. Like, we could get there like by the next time we're out, probably. Yeah. We just need to pay a little more attention to it. Warblers in the spring versus the fall, I think that's another one. And yeah, we were talking about the sharp-shinned versus the Cooper. From what I've read here, the sharp-shinned has a flatter or like a square tail, kind of just like ends abruptly, like flat, versus the Cooper has a more rounded tail. There's like little things like that can help you identify very similar looking birds. Mm-hmm. But this just goes to show that just looking at the bird may not 100% get you there all the way, because there's differences based on time of year, gender, stuff like that. Yep. So, as we know, there are, of course, other ways to ID. What is your next guess?
Another pretty common way, I think, is by sound.
By sound. And, we're notoriously good at that.
It's so good at it.
As you know, with the closing cause. Yep. And that doesn't even require seeing the bird. And this is where we start getting into the impressive territory for me, right? Like birders who can just solely identify things by sound. Yep. And you know what? I think we're there for certain species. Like, we know the calls of the usual suspects by now, just by being out there and experiencing them over and over and over again. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like we go out, and I mean, the red-winged blackbird calls are just kind of constant. You start tuning those out eventually, but you can always hear when a cardinal starts going and making its laser sounds. Mm-hmm. Pew, pew, pew. You can hear the "O Canada, Canada" of the white-crowned sparrows, white-throated sparrows. What is it?
White-throated sparrows.
Of the white-throated sparrows.
White-crowned is different, and I don't think we've seen it yet. Yeah. But.
And the Carolina wren, which makes a lot of different sounds, but they all kind of have a similar cadence to them. So we've gotten pretty good at identifying that one.
So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I am not classically musically trained like Sam over here, but I feel the music, I feel the music, but I don't know about pitch, I don't know about tone, I don't know about notes, and in a very like concrete way. But yeah, I feel the music in an amorphous sense, if you will. But I feel like those who like do have some sort of music education or knowledge, they may have some advantage as to like deciphering and hearing these bird calls. As someone who does, do you have any insight on that?
I think I do think it definitely helps, just in that it gives me more ways to identify and classify patterns. So the Carolina wren, I think, is a good example for me, where it makes a lot of different noises, a lot of different pitches. Some of its songs go up, some of its songs go down, but a common theme is that it pretty much always sings in triplets, right? Like da 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 da, which is not strictly speaking a triplet, but it does it in 3 notes. But
yeah, not to cut you off, but like I had no clue about that. Like I can pretty confidently identify a Carolina wren just from hearing it a lot, and like Sam said, it has a bunch of different songs, but I'm familiar with a lot of those, but this is something that like I'm not really tuned into, right?
Yeah. So that's normally how I identify the Carolina wren. Also, if it's just like the loudest sound you've ever heard, but the bird is really tiny, then it's a Carolina wren.
Mm-hmm. I should also note that even though we don't know many of the calls by heart, it is still very fun, very like fulfilling and enjoyable. Every time we hear the rattle of a belted kingfisher, and the fact that we are confident in knowing that it's belted kingfisher, it just feels good.
It feels really good.
Yeah, same thing with the northern cardinal, like you mentioned. Same thing with the Carolina wren, the red-winged blackbird, even the like great blue heron.
Yeah.
When it has that like guttural sound. Yeah, we know it's there.
Yeah, and obviously the barred owl, which is part of our song, the chickadee, which is part of our song,
Yeah, and you were mentioning, like you said, those mnemonics, like the who cooks for you with the barred owl, the chickadee-dee-dee with the black-capped chickadee, oh, Canada, Canada, Canada with the white-crowned sparrow.
White-throated sparrow.
White-throated sparrow. See, very common mistake.
Yep.
But I think it might even be helpful to make your own mnemonic up.
I think
like
so.
the oh, Canada, Canada, Canada. I think I even said that on a podcast before, or a podcast episode before that doesn't even make sense to me. Like,
right.
I don't hear the oh, Canada, Canada, Canada. Mm-hmm. But now that like someone has told me to look out for the oh, Canada, 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 I do, and I associate it with the white-throated sparrow call now. So if you're out and you hear a specific call and your brain just somehow comes up with a mnemonic for it, I think that's helpful, even though if it's not like a known mnemonic. If you just do it for yourself, I think that could be very helpful.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's kind of the whole point with those, is that they're there to help you. So if you have one that helps you and other people are like, I have no idea what you're talking about, doesn't matter. It helps you.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I feel like bird vocalizations are one of those aspects of birding that you can never learn enough of. There's so much information you can get from a vocalization, like whether it's a song or a call. Do you know the difference between a song and a call?
I guess I don't know, strictly speaking, the difference.
So songs are typically used to defend territory and attract mates, and therefore it's the males that sing it the most. So if you're looking at a bird and you know it's the male plumage, it might be a song that it's singing. Usually during breeding season, of course. And for certain species, the call and the song might not be super different. The call typically is a little shorter, and identifying by sound can be difficult if you're listening to the calls, because there's a lot of different types of calls. There's alarm calls if there's a raptor in the area, and we're talking about a songbird. There can be contact calls, which birds use to keep in touch with each other, like when they're foraging for food, to make sure they don't get separated and too far from each other. Mm-hmm. There's flight calls that certain species will make to be vocal during the air.
Canada geese,
there you go. So yeah, there's a lot of different vocalizations these birds make, whether that be songs or calls. And yeah, I feel like there's just a lot to learn, and you may not ever get to learn all of the calls, even in your local area.
Yeah, but I think starting out with the more identifiable ones is a nice way to start.
Exactly, yeah, baby steps. Like,
builds your confidence, makes you feel good when you go out and hear it, and then you can kind of start tuning those ones out and start keying in on the ones that are a little harder to recognize.
Yeah, I agree with that. Especially, if you are familiar with your local birds and what they sound like, if you hear a noise that you're not familiar with, that is going to stand out to you. You're going to be like, hey, that sounds a bit different. Mm-hmm. And you may know you have an unfamiliar species around, or a lot of the time, like for me, it's just another song sparrow with a different complex song that I've never heard before. But yeah, I think this takes us into our next part of identifying birds pretty well, which is doing your homework before you even go out birding. Mm-hmm. Again, not necessary, but it does help having an idea of what birds are supposed to be around when going for some identifications. So range maps, which show you when a bird is going to be in the area in what season. So if we look at our Sibley Field Guide, the different colors correspond to whether a bird is going to be in this area year-round, during just migration season, during the winter, during the summer. And I think this may be another thing we may gloss over and not explicitly think about. Like, we know songbirds are going to be in the spring and the summer, but ducks are mainly going to be or waterfowl in general is going to be in the winter. But I remember in the summer and in the fall, I remember in the summer and the fall trying to ID these warblers. Like, this must be a chestnut-sided warbler, or this must be an orange-crowned warbler, because at the time those were the only warblers I was familiar with and knew about, when in fact it was a yellow-rumped warbler or a palm warbler, which we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
those just didn't come up in my mind because I didn't even know they existed.
Right.
Right? So, of course, I'm not going to stumble onto the right identification if I don't know that bird even exists. So, doing your homework ahead of time and at least knowing what birds to expect in the area during that specific time of year, knowing that can be important before you're even out into the field.
I think we saw that a lot this winter too. And that was something I was going to say too, is that a lot of times when I'm identifying a new bird, it's based on, did I expect to see this bird today?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the easiest times to kind of start doing that, I think, is in the winter with the ducks. Because the ducks are so distinct from each other, and they're big enough and like kind of out in the open enough to really be able to observe and tell the difference. If you go into like a bird outing thinking, I'm going to see a bufflehead today, it's a lot easier to pick out a bufflehead than it would be if you're just going out and being like, whoa, what's that bird in the water there with some white on it?
Yeah, I do agree with that. On the other hand, I feel like there can be a little bit of bias associated with looking for a specific bird. Like when we were out at Cape May last summer, we really wanted to see a peregrine falcon. Mm-hmm. And we still really want to see a peregrine falcon because they're out and we know they're out.
Yep.
So anytime there's a raptor that we're unsure, we're like, hey, is that a peregrine falcon?
Yeah, definitely some like confirmation hunting, I think.
Yeah, it can like cloud your judgment if you're looking for a specific bird and you really want to see it. But yeah, so I think it's a double-edged sword there. You do want to know what's in your area and look for certain things, but you also don't want that to cloud your judgment if you really want to see a specific bird.
I think we saw that with the cackling goose.
100% for sure. And yeah, this is especially important if you're going somewhere new and not familiar with what birds are local to that area. I think we did a good job when we went to Bombay Hook last fall. Mm-hmm. We did a little bit of research. We wanted to see some sandhill cranes. We wanted to see American avocets.
Yep.
And we saw them.
We did.
And maybe if we weren't looking for them, we might have not seen them. Or, I mean, these are some... It may not be the best example because these are some large birds. Yeah. But if we're talking about like a specific small warbler, if we didn't know that it was in the area, we might have just totally missed it.
I think definitely. I think like part of the reason we were able to see those American avocets when we did was because we knew that in theory they were there. Mm-hmm. And we were driving out and we were about to give up and we just saw like kind of out in the distance a bunch of shorebirds together. We had just seen like a million dunlins, so we were pretty sure like, oh, those are just some more dunlins. But we stopped just in case.
Just to double check.
And they were avocets, so that definitely helped us out there.
Yeah, 100%. Another part of bird identification that maybe we don't use much and we probably should is knowing what birds are going to be in a certain habitat, and that can go a long way in terms of identification. Broadly speaking, we do this in a certain sense. Like if we're along a rocky beach shore like we were at Sashuist with no trees around, we're not really expecting to see a warbler out there, right? Conversely, if we're in a thick forest and we see a bird that we're not familiar with, we're pretty sure it's not a sea duck,
right?
Because that's just not where they are, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, this can seem obvious, but I think where the habitat knowledge can be more helpful is when we're talking about specific trees and plants. We've said this in previous episodes. We know that knowing how to ID trees and knowing what birds live in certain trees would help us. It's still something we can aspire to learn.
Yes, absolutely. If you know how to learn about trees and plants, I think Ryan mentioned a specific app that he uses on the episode that he...
Oh, really?
But I don't remember what it was.
So yeah, I did a little bit of cursory research. I don't know how to identify these trees specifically. By the way, I should have said this at the top of the episode. Most of what I'm talking about here is like from our personal experience, of course, but also the Audubon website.
Classic. Black
locust trees, red-bellied woodpeckers, really like them.
Okay.
Their thick bark allows them to cache food well. If we see a red-bellied woodpecker, or if we see a black locust tree, rather, we may be on the lookout for some red-bellied woodpeckers.
Right.
Once again, the yellow-rumped warbler. I actually thought this was pretty cool. Bayberry shrubs, they fruit bayberries, and the yellow-rumped warbler is the only warbler that can digest these berries.
Oh.
So,
wow.
And these berries fruit in the fall and they last throughout the winter. which is why you'll see the yellow-rumped warbler.
That's why we're seeing them everywhere. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we see them
more often
north for longer
Yeah.
than other warblers, because they can just eat these bayberries that no other bird is eating.
Wow.
So yeah, if we see a bird in a bayberry shrub, and especially during the fall when all the plumages are a little more muted and kind of blend in with each other, probably we can be reasonably sure that it's a yellow-rumped warbler.
Interesting. That's really cool.
Yeah, another example, crabapple trees. They also retain their fruit in the winter, and it's common for berry-eating birds that stay year-round, like American robins, to feed off of them. Robin's a pretty easy bird to identify, but, just another example. Beeches and oaks, there's this phenomenon called marcescence, and marcescence is basically when trees hold on to their brown leaves instead of dropping them.
Oh, okay.
Like many trees do. So when they hold on to their brown leaves, a lot of insects lay eggs on them.
Mm-hmm.
So these warblers know that, and they lay their eggs in these trees. They spend their time in these trees. So when their babies hatch, they have a food source.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And yeah, once again, that's beeches and oaks. So specifically, worm-eating warblers and honestly a lot of other songbirds do that.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. So again, something we should learn about more probably. Hopefully we do. Tree identification.
Gives us a more holistic approach to bird identification.
Exactly. Like if we're looking at a warbler and we're really not sure what it is, if it's in a specific tree and we know that this specific tree is only home to a certain type of warbler, then there we go. That's our identification. Even if we can't differentiate it with song, even if we can't differentiate it by plumage, this is another way to figure that out.
Yeah, very cool.
And the last part, and I think the most fun part, is bird behavior, or their actions. And, this is something you can read about in a field guide or in a book, but I feel like when you see it in real life and experience it, it's much more fun, and it kind of just sticks with you a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, if you're in our part of the U.S., Northeast, and you see a bird going headfirst down a tree, it could be a mile away. If I know it's a bird going headfirst down a tree, I know it's either a white-breasted nuthatch or a red-breasted nuthatch, which would be a lifer for me, by the way. So if any red-breasted nuthatches want to make themselves known, I'm right here. Yeah, I don't even need to hear the call or get up close or see any details. If I see that, then I know it's one of those two species.
Mm-hmm. And if it's going up a tree head first, that's a brown creeper.
Exactly. I paused there. I was hoping you would mention that, and you did. Love when that happens.
Yeah. The chemistry is unmatched here.
Yeah, and you're also better than me at identifying birds in flight. A lot of times when we see birds in flight, you can really easily pick up whether it's an eagle or a vulture, whereas sometimes I struggle. So go into your thought process with that.
Yeah, so raptors were a special interest of mine before even birds became a special interest. So I learned a lot about them in elementary school. And the one thing that's always stuck with me is it's hard to tell with a lot of raptors what they are because they're almost always above you, right above you. So you can't really see coloring at all. It's always silhouettes basically. And a falcon, if you compare a falcon to an eagle, you can tell wing shape. Eagles kind of have more feathers spread out, almost look like fingers. Whereas falcons are very sleek, very defined like a plane's wing.
Kind of streamlined.
Very streamlined. And a vulture also kind of has the spread out finger-like wings. So it's really hard to sometimes tell between a vulture and an eagle. One thing with the vulture though is that they'll have those wing tips kind of curled up almost a little bit, similar to how a plane's wing is. And they almost never flap. Once they're in the air, they just soar and soar. And they don't really need to flap very much. They ride air currents up and then just kind of soar down. You'll see them sort of almost like a hang glider, kind of micro adjust their position, but they almost never flap other than when they're taking off.
And I think that kind of makes sense because we know that vultures are scavengers, so they're kind of just circling around the same area versus an eagle might be trying to fly somewhere, right?
Exactly.
Cool, yeah. Going back to the sharp-shinned hawk versus the Cooper's hawk example, something I learned is that the sharp-shinned hawk, you can barely see its head coming out of its wings when it's in flight, versus a Cooper's hawk, you can see the head jutting out much more prominently.
Oh, that's good to know.
So even if you're just observing sharp-shinned slash a Cooper's hawk in a tree, if you just wait for it to take off, that's another aspect of identification you can look into, whether the head is like prominently jutting out versus if it's kind of just like squished into the wings.
Interesting. Very cool.
Some more obvious ones, if a duck's very far away, if we see it completely disappear and dive, we know it's a diving duck.
Right.
Versus if it's sticking its butt up in the air, then we know it's a dabbler.
Listen to the season opener, season 2, episode 1, if you want more info on that.
Exactly. And certain birds are solitary. Certain birds come in twosomes, like partnerships, and certain birds are in large groups. So there's much more ways to identify birds other than just like visual or sound, which I think is something that like goes a little bit unnoticed.
One thing that I've really wanted to start paying more attention to is sort of the flight patterns, because I know that's a good way to identify birds. Mm-hmm. Whereas some birds will, when they're flying in a straight line, they'll kind of constantly flap and they'll kind of go really straight. But some birds, like a cardinal and woodpeckers, they'll do a couple flaps, which will kind of bounce them up into the air, and then they'll fall down, and then a couple more flaps, and kind of like a wave.
Yeah, they're not like flying straight. They're kind of like straight. Swoop, swoop.
And that's something that I've wanted to pay more attention to.
Yeah. And, you know, I think this is an aspect of birding, like just like really observing and understanding their behaviors that you could always learn more about.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? And I feel like that's just kind of nice to know that like you'll never be 100% there and you'll always be able to learn more.
That's why I think makes it exciting every time you go out, because even if you see a bird that you've already seen before, just kind of going through the process of trying to identify it, it's like going through and making a new discovery each time.
Yeah.
That's kind of a very fulfilling feeling.
Yeah, I agree. I think now, like where we're sitting at, we're thinking it'd be nice to just have this like total knowledge of all these birds. But I think the journey is, as cheesy as it sounds, like the fun part of it, right?
It definitely is.
Yeah.
Because if we had our life list all the way filled out already, then like, what are we going out looking for?
Exactly. You know? Like, what are we out there doing? Like, learning something new every time. This is going to be my first spring migration, so I'm really excited about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what keeps us going. And I know I'm not going to learn everything in my first spring migration, so I'll have more things to look forward to next spring migration, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So, yeah, I just really wanted to do that breakdown of bird identification. I think sometimes we just do a quick calculation in our head, but there's all these aspects of birding that I think we can consider when it comes to bird identification.
Yeah, I'm really glad you went into all of that, because I have felt more and more like I've become reliant on getting a picture in order to figure out what the bird is after the fact. Mm-hmm. And I'd really like to focus on trying to figure it out, in the moment, or at least trying to like internalize the details in the moment. And then if I have to consult a guide afterward to figure it out, I can do that. But just that would help me be more present, I think.
Yeah, I feel that. All right. We made a cut. I'm sure Sam, during the editing, made it sound very natural, so it didn't even sound like a cut.
Seamless.
But we deliberated for a bit. I wanted to play a little game via the Merlin app, but our episode time was running a little long, so So Sam had the great idea of foregoing the closing caw this time around and just playing this little game, because I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, stay on board with us. We're going to come back to the closing caw next episode.
I know you guys really like the closing caw. I know you do, but I think this will be fun.
Yeah, and neither of us studied, so this is going to be better.
So, if you're not familiar, Merlin has 3 main ways of helping you identify birds. If you're out in the field, you can hit Sound ID, and it'll listen to all the noise that's incoming, and it'll let you know if it hears a specific call or a specific song from a bird, right? There's the Photo ID, where if you have a photo on your phone, then you can upload it, and it'll tell you the best match, right? There's also the step-by-step guide, which it'll ask you a series of questions. First, it will ask you the location. So for us, most of the time, it's going to be Philadelphia, PA. Mm-hmm. It's going to ask you the date, so April right now. It's going to ask you the size of the bird, and it gives you a range. Sparrow-sized to robin-sized to crow-sized or goose-sized or larger. And then it'll ask you what the main colors are. You can select up to 3. Black, gray, white, buff/brown, red, yellow, olive, blue, orange.
Mm-hmm.
And then it'll ask you, lastly, was the bird at a feeder, swimming or wading, on the ground, in the trees, on a fence, or soaring or flying? And it'll come up with a series or maybe just one likely bird.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it would be fun to make up a bird with certain qualities and see if the other person can come up with a list that's similar to Merlin.
Great.
Cool. So I'm going to select a bird in Philadelphia in the month of April that's in between a robin and a crow.
Okay.
That's brown, olive, and black.
Brown, olive, and black.
Swimming or wading.
Okay.
So yeah, give me your short list of birds that you think could.
Okay. Great. Well, the first one that comes to mind, if we're thinking of a swimming or wading bird between robin and crow, with olive is kind of the main thing I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of a mallard. What's going to be on that list?
Mallard's on there. Yep.
Okay. If I'm thinking of a mallard, the next thing I'd go to is a northern shoveler.
Northern shoveler's on there. Yep.
Great. Okay. Now it starts getting a little trickier. I think maybe what I would go to is a green-winged teal.
Nice. I thought you would miss that one, but that's a good one. That's a good one.
It's just got a little bit of olive on it.
Yeah.
And boy, maybe I'm misremembering. Would a blue-winged teal also be on there?
Merlin's not showing me blue-winged teal.
Okay.
It is showing me wood duck, though.
Oh, of course, the wood duck.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, that's good. And I think this is like really cool because if we're out there, if someone randomly was just like, hey, I saw this bird, it had these colors, it was swimming, and then Sam would reasonably be able to give them a list of birds that it could have been.
Unless it was a wood duck.
Unless it was a wood duck, you forgot a wood duck, but I don't know, I just think that's kind of cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Great. All right, well, I will get one ready for you then, too. I saw a bird in Philadelphia. It was in April. It was sparrow-sized, or smaller, or similar. And I definitely saw some brown on it, a little bit of yellow, and we'll say some black. It was in trees or bushes.
Okay.
What do we think?
Yellow, brown, black. It's pretty common colors, I would say. First thing that comes to mind is the white-throated sparrow.
Yep. It's got those little yellow eye patches.
Mm-hmm. This may be too early, but maybe the yellow rump warbler.
Yellow rump warbler's on there.
Cool. May not be the exact location, or it might be a rare bird in the area. Chestnut-sided warbler.
I'm not seeing chestnut-sided warbler.
Okay. Common yellowthroat on there.
Yellowthroat, I think, might be later in the year. I'm not seeing it on here.
Okay. How many birds are on there?
There's a lot.
There's a lot. Well, yeah. American goldfinch on there?
American goldfinch is on there. The Merlin will sometimes ignore a color, so there's not too much brown on there, but out of season, there's some brown.
It's true. Or the females have brown.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it, the palm warbler kind of has some brown streaks. Palm warbler?
Palm warbler's on there.
Cool. Yeah, I feel like there's is there a lot of options for this one? I feel like there can be a ton.
I gave you a tricky one. There are a lot of options. So you got some, and then Savannah sparrow is also one, though that's pretty uncommon.
Sure.
Golden crown kinglet and ruby crown kinglet are both on there.
Yeah, golden crown, I feel like I should have gotten, yeah.
Ruby crown, there's it's slightly yellow tinged, you know?
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily say that, but lots of warblers. So yellow rumped palm, which you both got. Pine warblers on there. Mm-hmm. And then it also goes into, says house sparrow, house finch, European starling, and red-winged blackbird. I think those are a bit of stretches, but...
Yeah, sometimes Merlin just really wants to give you as much options as possible.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, I think this was fun.
I agree.
Do.
Yeah. Our answers were better than the Merlin answers.
Yeah, I know, because we're humans. And,
we're a little more refined.
A little more refined. Yeah. But yeah, cool. I hope to take maybe a little more methodical approach to my identification and not get too stuck on a specific ID, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I think, if we can develop just sort of a rubric that we automatically go through every time we see a new bird, I think that would be really helpful.
And, like I said, we're always learning, always getting better each time we go out.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, and I think this was a timely episode to do right before spring migration, right before a lot of new birds come into the area.
Yeah, I think we'll get a lot of good practice. Hopefully you all get practice at home, too. Thanks for listening to this episode. Thanks for leading that main topic, Kesh. This was a really interesting one, like you said, quite timely. Let us know what kind of birds you're seeing, or if you're unsure, give us some qualities. Maybe we'll be able to figure it out for you. Thank you for listening. As always, please do send in hoot topics. It does just kind of make our job a lot more fun if lots of people send in questions, and it makes the episodes a little more interesting. But thank you, as always, for listening. We do appreciate it quite a bit.
Yeah, you can message us or you can email us at birdsarereal.pod@gmail.com or hit us up on Instagram, birdsarerealpod.
We kind of popped off on Instagram this past week. Turns out people like pictures of us with our faces in it.
Holding
Horrible
up
news
trash.
for me, but apparently that's what the people want to see.
Yeah, we might try to do, as the weather gets nicer, we might try to do some reels and whatnot to, like show you what we're actually doing when we're out there birding.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, stay tuned for that.
We are developing a little bit of merch, some stickers. We're going to have some stickers, maybe for sale, maybe we're just going to give them out. But yeah, follow us on Instagram if you want more info on that.
And as always, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
If you're out and about, pick up some trash while you're at it.
Yeah, even if it's a shoe with a stick growing on it.